So the title of this video admittedly is not the title I wanted to use. Title is The Death of Expertise, but really the title should be The Attempted Murder of Expertise. And I think if you look around, you'll see sort of every way that this is happening, but I think it's important that we look at these instances, look at the larger goal, and try to understand what's happening and recognize it for what it is. So I will ground this generally in HHS, but I do think this extends far outward into every other part of Trump's government. What you notice if you look at the firings, the people they let go, the people they throw under the bus, the first thing they attack is expertise. You see this with the law firms. You see this with the universities. You see this in government departments where experts are being put out, department heads are being removed, and day-to-day personnel are being muzzled or let go. And when you look at the reasons why this is happening, it becomes really, really apparent that there's a goal behind it. If there is one thing that a group of liars, that a group of fascists can't tolerate, it's dissent. But dissent in and of itself is to be expected. So what you have to do is you have to take away anything that is authoritative dissent. And you do this by attacking expertise. You do this in a very systematic way by constantly attacking anyone who speaks out against you or anyone who has an idea that is contrary to what you have. And like I said, RFK Jr. at HHS is a prime example of this. A man who in a hearing has said, I wouldn't take medical advice from me. I'm not a doctor. A man who is in charge of all of our health services says this. And simultaneously removes a bunch of really, really qualified people from positions so that he can impose his own agenda, so that he can roll back the access to vaccines, so that he can remove fluoride as a medication for children, so that he can focus on attacking his pet projects and sort of shunting everything he doesn't agree with or doesn't believe out of view. And that's sort of his MO. And what we look at when that happens is that the reason he's doing it is not just because he disagrees with them, but because he does not want them to disagree with him. He is currently in the process of the beginning phases of sort of forcing any government scientists from publishing their work in well-respected medical journals, and instead making a government-based journal, which almost certainly will follow his viewpoints and publish the studies that he chooses that confirm the things he wants to believe. So what he's doing is he is taking away our access to that information, and he is now forcing in information that he wants to be there, whether or not it's correct. But based on things like his Maha report, and I fucking hate that I have to say these things because it's so fucking stupid, but based on the report, which had a bunch of citations that weren't actual citations, which is pretty heavy evidence that someone has used AI to draft something. Because one of AI's biggest sort of hurdles when it comes to that sort of fact-based publication is that if you tell it the thing you want it to find, it'll make up the stats and figures that you want to see, and it will make up citations. And so when you look into these citations, a lot of them aren't real. What we're going to see is that he uses all of that position of power, all of the reach and authority that position does rightfully have, to push his narrative and to silence dissent. And it's because we're not in a vacuum. I think this sort of tactic is going to have some effect. I want to be clear. I do think this is not an entirely useless thing that they are doing. But what I believe is that it would have been more effective 30 or 40 years ago. Back when the government was a prolific source of the information we got on a day-to-day basis, back when scientific publications were a huge outlet for things, I think this would have had more traction. But what we're seeing is that increasingly people are speaking up in other forums and knowing not to trust what certain bodies in this government are saying. And because of that, this will have some effect, but I don't think it'll be outsized. I think that people will be rightly skeptical of the things that he says or publishes or instructs his minions to publish. And I do think that that's going to have some effect, but again, it'll be more muted. But I think the real concern that I have is around the push for AI generally in these things. If you're like me, you've noticed a lot of people using Grok to dunk on Elon. It's kind of a fun pastime if that's your thing. But I think that's a problem. Because we see that they are increasingly pushing for more AI and things, for using it more. And I think what they want with the push to remove expertise from positions of power is to be an authoritative figure that tries to claim all expertise. And I think the linchpin of this will be those AI models. I think things like Grok and ChatGPT are their end game. And we know that Elon has been trying to manipulate what Grok answers, and it has been so far evading him. That it still tends towards telling the truth and following facts. But it's a computer program. They will find a way to manipulate it. And so all of our using Grok to dunk on Elon just lends credence to it. So that when they finally get under the hood and make it say what they want it to say, we've already provided that credence. We've already seeded that ground. And so now we have to listen to every jackass who pulls it up and it lies, and we have to say, oh, well, no, it changed, and we've already lost the fucking argument. Expertise is not something we should give away so freely for a few internet points. It is not something we should just seed in this ground. There are so many authoritative bodies in law and in education and in science and in health. There are so many people who are reputable, or organizations that are reputable. And it's so important that we focus on those things. We can't fall back and use the tools that are owned by the very people who want to manipulate everything we see. The people who want to manipulate data, the people who want to manipulate perception, the people who buy whole-ass social media sites so that they can tune a narrative. The idea of this entire regime of people in charge is that they understand that you have to hold multiple levers to hold more power. You have to hold the cultural game. You have to hold the information game, and you have to hold the power game. The culture has to be yours. You have to have people wanting to be part of the thing you have, the thing you are. You have the power game, that is the government game, that is having actual force. The force of law, the force of law enforcement. And then you have that bit about expertise or knowledge. You have that bit about communication. And they want to control these things because we cannot see truth in a vacuum. And it's so much harder to discern lies in a vacuum. But that's what they're trying to do. And it falls to us to understand that and to play that game better than them. So what we do is we focus on finding the right experts and listening to them. We don't let anything slide when someone is using AI to get away with something, to try and change a narrative. You check their sources, you find out they're bullshit. Then you dig into the study and you figure out what's bullshit about that. And I know there is this thing that we like to do on the left a lot that I'm not a huge fan of. And that is, we always like to sort of preface an attack on someone else with some statement to make ourselves seem reasonable. And I'll give you the prime example. A lot of people, when they talk about RFK, will, either at the front end of what they're saying or somewhere in the middle, say that he has some good ideas about some things. Right? They'll say that. Because maybe they want a specific food dye out of the food. Maybe they want to make food healthy generally. And you could argue that some of those positions might be good. But you shouldn't. Because that same level of charitability, that same level of evenness, and that soft touch is not present on their side. Everyone they disagree with is a monster or a villain or some sort of demon. And we cannot let them hold that narrative ground and then give inches to them to make people who are wholly unreasonable seem reasonable. It doesn't matter if RFK somehow closed his eyes and landed as backwards into a correct opinion. RFK is like a calendar. He's right about once every 6 years. Which means he's wrong a fucking lot of the time. It's not a stopwatch. It's not a broken clock. He's not right twice a day. He's right, once a decade. So you don't need to give him charitability. He has absolute dog shit opinions about health and about science. He is so conspiracy brained, or whatever's left of it from the fucking worms, which, again, I don't like repeating that because that was just some bullshit he said during a fucking divorce proceeding to try and get out of paying alimony, which is fucking wild. But even in all of that, he's wrong about so much, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that you do not need to give him the benefit. You do not need to allow him any grace. You don't have to be reasonable with people who are, by their actions, unreasonable. You shouldn't be. Because when you cede that ground, you provide them some legitimacy that they will wield against you. This is not a nuanced figure we're talking about. We're not talking about someone who is deeply marred in good points and bad points. This is someone who is overall very bad. And you don't have to whitewash that. You shouldn't whitewash that. And I think it's this entire idea that needs to be pretty clear on the left. You don't have to find common ground with bad people. You don't have to do a fucking compliment sandwich when you're tearing down a fascist or their enablers. You need to speak the truth full-throated. The weight of their misdeeds so outweighs the positives that there's no point in putting it on a fucking scale. And all of these people want to remove expertise to kill it so that they can hold a monopoly on what we could consider truth. But we don't have to believe them. The rest of the world won't change like that. And even within the US, there are still people inside who are pushing back. RFK says one thing about the COVID vaccine. Well, CDC says another. Whether or not that person has a job in a week from now, that person is doing the good fighting and doing good work of standing up for what they believe in. Because another thing that you will find, and this is more true across the government than I think a lot of people understand, but that even people who have an ideological bent tend to have morals about things. They tend to believe in something. We saw this a lot in the Department of Justice, with a bunch of lawyers at the beginning of the administration resigning when asked to do things that were unethical or illegal, who would write letters with their resignations stating that what was being done was wrong. And you had to be a fool to follow those orders. Because people with expertise even ideologically slanted individuals tend to still believe in the systems they operate in. You don't dedicate your life to being a career prosecutor if you don't believe in the law. You don't dedicate yourself to science if you don't believe in following the facts. These people, experts, tend to come with that. And so the administration will remove them and replace them with cronies who care only for the approval of dear leader and not for what is right. I don't know how we move forward from this culturally, because I think that I find myself in a lot of ways at odds with the way other people feel about things. But I also think that at least what we can do is keep moving forward, keep believing in the things we believe in, keep acting on those, and keep being and continue being true to ourselves and true to our values. So I guess the final message is support experts. Support the idea of people being experts. Support the idea of expertise, because everything around you wasn't built by some jackass who didn't know what they were doing. It was built by someone who was an expert at a thing. And only idiots ignore expertise because they think they know better. After a little bit of Google searching or a little bit of listening to fucking RFK gravel voice his way through some bullshit monologue about vaccines or autism or health or truly anything. So I am still working on videos around the report on trans healthcare and now the MAHA, I fucking hate it, report. Those will be coming up, but next week I will be releasing my video on two very great movies, Cabin in the Woods and Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. So, one last time, if you haven't seen them, I recommend you see them before next week, because that video will be littered with fucking spoilers. Either way, take care of yourselves, take care of others, and I will see you next week.